everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's so wonderful to be here with you. You are at the webinar called Are We Putting Too Much on Leaders? Navigating Burnout in an Era of Endless Disruption. And I don't know about you, but this is definitely a topic I'm constantly trying to learn more about. It's top of mind. I fluctuate between like being excited about the future and all the amazing disruption, sometimes being terrified, and a lot of times being somewhere in between. So when Vijay and I were thinking about what could be some of the great and really relevant things we could share with our friends and our network, we thought this is definitely a topic that everyone can benefit from these days. So I will be your host for the webinar. My name is Sanja Licina. I am the president of the Employee Experience Business Unit at Question Pro. I'm also an organizational psychologist and just an enthusiast about everything related to organizational culture, people being happy at work, feeling fulfilled. And so today, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by my dear friend Vijay. We have known each other for several years now. He's been at our X Days, our Question Pro company events. He is somebody who I just have tremendous respect for and I've learned so much from over the years. And so I was thrilled when he said, hey, let's do this together. And I'd love to, join your audience and share a little bit about my work. He's been a practitioner for a long time. He's a PhD. Now he has his own practice where he's taken all of this great knowledge and really goes to organizations to help them with productivity, with having better cultures, and so much more. And so, Vijay, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we jump into our discussion and everything we want to share today, I'd love for you to share a little bit more with our guests and our friends online about your background, because again, I was telling you before when we were chatting, I'll have to pass the mic to you because I'll never be able to highlight all of it and do it justice, but you just have such a unique and diverse and rich background. And so I'd love for everybody who's joined us today to know what perspective you're coming from and why what you have to share is so valuable.
Oh, thank you so much, Sanja. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be working with you on this. It feels like a long time in the making, and it's like our warm up. We get to do this together, and we're going to get to be together at X Day in just a few months, which is a super fun conference. Let me just say, I think that one of the standout features in X Day is it's not a boring event. It's spicy, it's lively, it's a value add. So very, very excited to be on the stage with you there. A little bit about me so that you know a little bit about where my perspective comes from on teams and culture and leadership. My parents are immigrants to the United States. I grew up in Chicago. And, while there's not a straight line between that fact I just shared and my perspective on leadership and teams, I think anybody who is a child of immigrants out there knows that it's a pretty foundational piece. And I think from an early age, I always had this sense of duality, right? Am I here? Am I in this culture? Am I part of something else? And so questions of where I fit in and how people come to fit in oftentimes shaped some of my early teenage years. When I was in college, as I came into my own, I was always thinking about how is it that people arrive at a sense of comfort and the ability to just be and perform. My own journey towards comfort and performance was, I think, elongated because of not necessarily always feeling normal in the spaces I was in. I ended up working in my first career. I've had a few careers. In my first career, I worked at universities. I worked at 5 universities around the United States. And I got my master's and PhD along the way. And I was working on student experience design. So how do we actually look at universities as complex ecosystems and re-engineer aspects of the university experience so that students can do the best work of their life? And if folks on the call have been to college, you remember back, there are a lot of things about the collegiate experience that are not designed around the end user experience. They're idiosyncratic and weird and often very opaque. And students often succeed in spite of the way universities are designed. And I felt really motivated and purpose-driven in helping universities use data and systems and processes to unlock student performance. And then I took that bag of tricks into employee experience work. It's actually, the dynamics don't change when we trade our student IDs for our employee IDs. Ultimately, we're people in complex organizations as employees, and we're oftentimes in environments and around people that are either accelerating our performance, unlocking our greatness, or slowing us down, hindering our performance and our greatness, right? And so, as an employee experience specialist, I worked at a couple of different tech companies that were all global, and I worked on trying to create environments and affect people enablement or people skill sets so that people could actually be the engine through which companies accomplish their big, audacious goals. And then I launched my own business. And so I started as an entrepreneur 2 years ago, and that's been an amazing journey. I get to work across so many different sectors now, from consumer goods to high tech to manufacturing to heavy industry. And I also released a book called The Alchemy of Talent. It's a bestseller. I'm very grateful for that. And so The Alchemy of Talent is available wherever you buy your books. And it is a behavioral science guide on how you lead teams through endless disruption. And I'll sort of end my introduction there because it's a good sort of pass of the baton back to you.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that incredible background. And I actually even learned a couple of things about you from that. I'm also, well, I guess I was an immigrant myself as well. Not directly into Chicago, but spent over a decade there. So you and I have even more overlapping paths in our life than I knew. So I love that about having my friends on the show. I feel like sometimes I would learn something new about them in our conversation and in the introduction. And so you talked about disruption and talking about that in your book. And it's been incredible because I feel like every year, people think, there's more disruption than the year before. And there's so much going on and there's so many things changing. But I would say probably even objectively, this year more than ever before. And I think that there's so many different levels of uncertainty, from technology and AI to geopolitical uncertainty. And there are all of these things that we're just not really sure where the path ahead lies. And so when we think about this disruption, like, what do you think this means for employees? What do you think that means for leaders? Like, what would you
Mm.
be your recommendation for how do we approach this to really get the most out of it? Maybe having, like a healthy dose of, like, I don't want to say fear, but understanding what's going on, like looking at the positives. So anyways, I'd love to learn about your perspective, because I think today maybe there's not necessarily a right or a wrong. There's
Mm.
different ways to approach it. And for a lot of people, just knowing how to think about it and knowing how others think about it adds so much value. So,
Mhm.
what's
Mhm.
your perspective on and advice on disruption and everything that's going on today?
Well, let me start by being bold and spicy and provocative, right? If maybe people just had a big meal and they're like already starting to get a little hazy, and I'm like, no, let me stick, the finger in the light socket a little bit. So you said, look, I don't think there's a right or a wrong. Let me be provocative. I think there's a wrong.
Mhm.
And so
Mm.
let me express a strong point of view on this.
Yeah.
We have plenty of data that the frequency and the severity of disruptions in our world and in our work and in our personal lives is increasing. If you look
Mhm.
back at the last 5 years, I think that the pandemic was a real sea change for most of us, personally and professionally. And
Yeah.
we thought, most of us, I'll share personally, right? I was like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I had like a 2-year-old and a
Yeah.
4-year-old at home. I'd never worked from home before. It was just like hot mess. Sky is falling.
Mhm.
My wife and I are trying to figure it out. It was like, okay, well, when this clears away and we get back to the stable new normal, I'm just going to take some breaths, and I'm going to be so thankful to be back in 2019. 5 years later, one thing is clear: 2019 is gone. That norm is
Yeah.
gone. That reality is gone,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
what the last 5 years have taught us is actually that, um, due to a lot of factors that aren't worth covering in this podcast, right? But these are sort of really macro factors or exogenous factors, right? Changing geopolitics, the state of the global economy, the shift free trade into some sort of a new system that is being driven by the largest economy on earth, and all kinds of stuff, right? There's just a level of disruption that presents us with a right and a wrong. And the way I would clarify this here is the wrong thing to do in 2025 is to, one, be searching for how to get back to 2019. And while it might sound really like, wait, who's doing that? Actually, many of the organizations that I speak with talk about the fact that some subset of their people are still grieving the way things used to be. And I understand that grieving psychologically, but I also know that from a tactics perspective, that's a problem. It's a problem for any business that wants their people to be pointed forward. The second mistake that I think is wrong is to lay out a structure of plans that assume stability in a time horizon that is nearly impossible. So if somebody tells me at the personal level, at the small to medium-sized business level, or at the enterprise level that they have a 5-year plan, I have questions for you, because if we've learned anything from the last 5 years, is that it may not be worth having 5-year plans. You can have a 5-year conversation, but anybody who's like, we took a whole quarter and we built a 5-year roadmap, come on now. That's a waste of calories. And then the third wrong, I think, is to not take this moment as an opportunity to reskill leaders around what it means to lead in endless disruption, as opposed to what it meant to lead in the before times. And what I mean by that is, if you ask most leaders what change management is, they'll use different language, because we all learn about change management in different ways. But what they'll largely say to you is change management is the process of helping lead your people by building a bridge from the thing that's ending to the new beginning. And the leader's job is to shine a light at that stable new normal and to help build the path there and to lead the people there by both management and leadership, and to get them to the stable new normal, change management. I think that entire paradigm is under extraordinary stress right now, because if you're a leader trying to build a stable path to a new normal, the thing you lack is the stable new normal. And so endless disruption calls for us to renormalize a set of leadership tools that actually are more equivalent to riding a wave like a surfer does, rather than building a bridge. Bridge building assumes a level of stability that gives you a known destination. Riding a wave is about actually learning to be buoyant and to do what you need to do right now. And maybe the next wave, you'll need to actually operate very differently. So the endless pivot, right? And when you're trying to build bridges, and you have to pivot over and over and over again, it breaks things. It breaks people, it breaks plans, it breaks teams. And so and this is the miss that I'm seeing the most in organizations, Sanja, is actually the failure to actually normalize endless disruption and then reskill leaders with a toolbox that allows them to surf. They're still treating leaders as bridge builders. And that's, I think, incongruent with our reality.
Yeah. Why do you think that's happening? Do you think, is it just because it's so hard for people to adapt to change? Is it because they even themselves don't feel like they have the toolbox? Because I love what you're saying. One of the one of the many things that really resonated is even like these plans and these roadmaps. And I've when I've had conversations when I was younger, and someone would even interview me for a job, and they would say, "Where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years?" I remember having that conversation when I moved to Argentina, and I was like, "Oh, no, no, I don't do that anymore." Because if you asked me even like a year ago, I would have never thought I was going to be here. And that happened
Right.
quite a few times in my life. And I thought, there's some value in understanding like your principles and where generally you want to be, but to
Yep.
have this like very particular roadmap and the steps, what I would also say is sometimes it really prevents you from seeing these amazing different paths, because you're
Mm,
so focused with the toolbox that you have and like the specific destination, that it's so much easier for something better, more powerful to pass you by, because you're not as open to it. So I love
sure.
that you talked about that. And I think It's interesting because in my role, I work a lot with analysts, and one of my key areas of responsibility, a question for was to develop our product. And I'm
Mm.
starting to even see from analysts, like them shifting their question. There used to be like, what's your 3 to 5 year roadmap? Like, what are you thinking about doing in the next year? Like, give me that,
Exactly.
and I'm like, yeah,
Exactly.
you're getting it. You're getting it. And
Yes.
sometimes
Yes.
I'm like, I don't, we really focus on the 6 months, but I could tell you my ideas for like the next 3 years, but I can tell you absolutely that it's not going to go in the same direction. So
Yep.
we were talking about, leaders, we were talking about that, oftentimes that desire to kind of go back and,
Mm.
have something that maybe we romanticize as really stable. And one of the things that I've grappled with for many years is how much of the responsibility do we put on leaders for anything,
Mm.
right? Like
Mm.
even during the pandemic, it was like well-being, and I thought, so like I'm a psychologist. And I had many times where I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle these situations. These are really big. And as a psychologist, I'm much better equipped than your average leader that is like an economist or an engineer or has like a totally different background. And so I have struggled with that from an organization. It's like a lot of times we say, oh, is this like an organizational challenge? Is it a leader challenge? Is it an individual challenge? And a lot of times I feel like we would just like throw it to the leader as a catch-all
Yeah.
to be like, ah, they can figure it out. They can figure it out. um, do you think we're putting too much on leaders? Like, what is the balance?
Yeah.
Like, what can leaders effectively do? And where is it like, guys, like, come on, stop, because you're just setting somebody up for failure at this point.
Right, right. I mean, I appreciate you naming this because I do think that there's evidence that there is some real leader burnout happening right now. And so a couple of things I can say on this is I think that the tricky part is that leaders matter immensely. So there's a rational reason that we keep
Yeah.
pointing back to leaders. Leaders have an outsized effect on team performance. And so you can have, let's say you have a team of 10 people, one person's the leader, 9 people are on the team. If it's a very talented, hardworking team and a dysfunctional leader, the net output of that team will be way less than 10 people's output. The leader
Mhm.
matters. The leader has an outsized effect. Um, and we also know that the team has to also have the capacity and skill to work differently as well. So we can't only focus on leaders because the team is the unit of performance. And so the investment
Yeah.
actually has to be at the team level with some unique emphasis on what the leader needs to be doing, but also some reskilling about what it means to be on the team. In my world, we call that teaming, the practice of actually teaching people how to function on a team. I think when you talk about like, gosh, is it fair? Are we just overloading leaders? I think if your solution to navigating endless disruption is more, then yes. The word more already should trigger questions and a yellow flag, right? Because I'm going to assume that the leaders in your organization are maxed out in terms of learning, workload. Depending on what sector you're in, you may have done some delayering, which means reducing the number of middle managers. And so the size of teams has grown. So leaders have more direct reports. So anytime a learning development team or a talent development team or HR or a business just says, well, I think we can give our leaders another set of tasks, caution. My whole approach to this is actually around getting back to fundamentals. How do we revisit um, basic team effectiveness with the lens of team effectiveness in constant change? So it's not more; it's actually just going back to let's give leaders some behavioral tools about how they show up every week. It's not new things to do; it's different things to do. Different forms of communication, different rituals that happen at the team level, different ways of building a continuous improvement engine on the team through behavior that actually create agility and resilience and innovation on the team. So the leader is rewarded for this behavioral shift because they get a team that actually starts winning more. They get a team that moves faster. They get a team that actually bounces back from hardship more quickly. Those are things every leader wants. So when you bring a behavioral toolbox forward and you say, here's the kinds of behavioral shifts that we want to see, it's not we want you to go and plan a heroic global offsite. People are like, I don't have time or budget for that. This is
Mhm.
about rhythms and rituals that actually change team level function. And and if you want, and we can dig in on what those are and how they can
I
help.
would, I actually would love that because that's you. You saw my mouth. You read my mind because I think, at a high level, all of that makes sense. But if I'm a leader and I'm listening to you right now, and I'm like, yes, I'm in. Tell me more. What should I do?
Yeah.
What are some of the examples? I'd love to kind of get almost like more tactical. So for somebody to be
Yeah.
able
Let's
to,
get
I don't
tactical.
know, grab their pen or like be on their keyboard. You see like my eyes
Yes.
shifting sometimes, and I'm actually like always taking notes, even though we've talked
Sure.
about this
Sure.
before. But I feel like every time there's more, when there's something that a person can walk away and say like, wow, I can really implement this now. I think that's really powerful. So do share more, please.
Yeah, let me try and create a simplified tactical model. When you're leading a team, so for those of you on the call who are leading a team and your team has pivoted and pivoted and pivoted because of disruption in this world, three things that you want to hedge against are change fatigue, which is basically when the battery for tolerating the next change goes down, right? So you need to solve for this because the team needs to be able to tolerate the next change. The second thing is clarity collapse. Clarity collapse is when you've reprioritized so many times, the team becomes unclear on what they're solving for, why they're solving for that, and what success looks like. And then the third thing is trust erosion. And trust erosion is the rise of skepticism that comes about naturally when you have to reprioritize enough times. And so leadership behaviors that hedge against these threats to your business and your team's success. So let's go backwards. Trust erosion. So one of the things you can do to constantly buy back trust from your team is to reestablish the big why and the North Star. The North Star is where we're going, and the big why is why we're doing it. And so when I'm coaching leaders of intact teams, and they're like, "Gosh, my team is they keep they're getting so skeptical. They're constantly assuming things about like our work doesn't matter, or I don't feel valued by leadership." I'll ask, when's the last time you helped them connect the granular work of the team to the overall win for the organization? Oh, we did that at our annual offsite. Oh, no, 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 no. In endless disruption, you have to have a regular cadence of revisiting where you're going and why you're doing it in ways that help particularly mid and entry level team members connect their calories, their effort to the things that they see the CFO and the COO and the CEO talking about on the call, on the all hands call. And when you do that skillfully on an irregular cadence once a month, people are actually able to sustain trusting you and trusting the organization because they see their effort as meaningful and purpose driven. So things like clarity collapse. You may go, well, how is it possible to preserve clarity? We keep getting new KPIs and OKRs or whatever corporate speak you want to use for goals, right? They just keep changing them on us, right? I get it. It's super hard, particularly mid-management gets crushed by this, right? But the thing is, you can actually establish a ritual of clarity by having things that you do with your team in your team meetings. So an example of this is a who's on first exercise. Who's on first is the old joke. It's an Abbott and Costello comedy routine, which points to the idea of like, if you don't even know who's doing what on the team right now, it's very easy for the swim lanes to get fuzzy and for the team to become inefficient and toxic very quickly. So on a regular basis at your Monday morning stand-up or your weekly team meeting, going through and having a quick conversation, 5 minutes. Here's our 3 key priorities right now. For each priority, who's the driver? This is the person who owns the project. Who's the supporters? These are the people that don't own the project, but they're contributing effort and lift. And then who needs to be informed? Who's the executive that we have to keep apprised of this work that doesn't need to tell us what to do every minute of the day? But if we don't bring them along, we're setting ourselves up for political backlash, right? So very basic. If for those of you who are operators or PMs, that's a boiled down RACI, right? It's a boiled down RACI, but coming up with a stripped down version of a RACI that buys back clarity as part of the ritual of the team's hygiene, right? So these are the kind of behavioral tricks that I teach. I often evangelize in my writing and in my coaching work for companies and teams, which is like, we actually have to build a team hygiene that normalizes and then puts in rituals and practices that actually counter the corrosive effects of endless disruption on
So
clarity,
I have a few burning questions for you.
yeah.
One,
What's up?
and
Ask away.
I love it because your philosophy is usually like, oh, it depends. It could be this, and you're like, girl, no, this is the way to do it. There's no in between. Uh, so this is one that I'm struggling with. It's like very top of mind for me, and so hopefully for all of you joining us as well, or at least some of you is I grew up with the philosophy of a lot of relationship building between team, like my team members as a leader,
Mhm.
having regular one-on-ones, having regular team meetings. Because one thing that I realized with one-on-ones, especially this is one of my first leaders taught me this, like a lot of times she would ask me to do more, more, more. And
Mhm.
I'll be like,
Mhm.
Mayor, the list is long. Now we got to prioritize. And because we had these weekly meetings, I had a space where I could comfortably bring that up, where it was like an ongoing discussion and became a part of our norm. And that kind of trickled down to my relationship with my team members. Like we would meet once a week, depending sometimes on their seniority, on their role. Like it could be
Mhm.
an hour meeting, a 30, but it was this regular cadence. And then actually from one of the first coaches I had when I was so lucky to have a coach, like when I first started my career. So I could
Wow.
quickly find, she's like, when do you have team meetings? I'm like, a what? So I'm like, haven't thought about, I'm doing the one-on-ones. And so it was a
Mm.
really great space and something I continue today where people go in and now we do it once a month. And what's interesting for my
Mm.
team is like we have engineers and we have product and we have customer
Mhm.
success and we have sales. Like it's very different. But for me, I always said, one of I think the reasons why I've enjoyed my jobs and been relatively successful in my career is because I always had this holistic picture of how a company works or how a team works. And so even though maybe some of my team members could be just fine, doing stuff on their own and not understanding what somebody else does, I feel like that really helps them.
Yep.
Now, fast forward to, today, there's like things are moving so quickly and I feel like there's a little bit more debate on like how often do you meet with people and how
Mm.
much do you do things async or how much like do you actually spend time in having formal one-on-ones? And I'm struggling with that a little bit. Like we're doing a big project and
Sure.
we'll talk about more, about that at X Day with Michael Park, a professor from Wharton, looking at a sense of belonging and psychological
Mm.
safety. And so we're actually doing that at Question Pro right now. And I'm sometimes curious, like, is it my old school way of thinking around that connection and like a more ongoing cadence? Is there something that's more effective today? How do you
Sure.
decide? So I'd love to know your stance on that because I know that's something I'm personally working on right now, figuring out what's
Yeah.
the best way ahead and how I connect with my team and also again continue to motivate them and give them that North Star. And I think sometimes in disruption, there's like days where it's like, oh my God, like I don't know how to make sense of this and things are
Yep.
breaking. And to me personally, we need that more North Star and that sense of reassurance at that time more than ever. So, anyways,
Yep.
I said a lot. I'd love your
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So decision-making framework, I love decision-making frameworks that
Yeah.
are contextually agnostic, right? So what is a way
Yeah.
you can make decisions that allows you to then take the framework and apply it in your context? Every context is
Yeah.
different. So I can't be prescriptive to context, but I can offer a framework here, right? That I
Yeah.
think is helpful for everybody on the call. So one thing is to think about the idea of a meeting, whether it's a one-on-one, it's a leadership team, it's the whole team, as solving for something specific and getting
Hmm.
clarity as to why do you do this thing? Because the idea of spending time with people synchronously should be, you should have a document as a team leader, particularly as you move up, if you're director or VP level, where you actually list out what are you using one-on-ones for? What do you use the leadership team Monday morning meeting for?
Hmm.
What do you use the all team meeting for?
Hmm.
Because they can actually be pointed and very differentiated.
Hmm.
The reason that clarity is key here is because when you try and use a meeting structure that is not conducive to the thing you're solving for, you waste everybody's time and energy.
Hmm.
So if somebody says, in my portfolio, I have 65 people. And I say, how often do you do all team meetings? Oh, we do a weekly all team meeting. Why do you do a weekly all team meeting with 65 people? Well, there's so much operational work. Okay, we have a mismatch here because if you're going to get operational, then you don't pull the whole team together. right? The advantage of
Yeah.
having the whole team together is to focus on first making sure that everybody is singing from the same songbook. So a huge reason you pull the whole team together is to get alignment, clarity and
Hmm.
alignment. That's a key opportunity. It's a key value driver for why you pull the whole team together. Another reason you pull the whole team together is to increase sense of belonging. So things that you can do
Hmm.
when the whole team is together are like pointed recognition or an activity that actually creates a sense of commonality and shared experience. When you pull the whole team together, you can also do some high impact learning oriented things like an app where you look back on a project and you pick apart things that went well, things that could be improved so that you actually set off that learning engine for the whole group. But if you
Hmm.
say you're doing day to day task execution for the whole group, that's inefficient. So again, day to day task execution oftentimes is done at the sub team level, right? The strike team level. What 5 people are working on a project? That's the execution level that you have a meeting where you're aligning on who's on first, solving a problem,
Yeah.
clarifying agreements. If you're in an execution focused meeting, you never leave that meeting without an immaculate agreement. Who's doing what, by when, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what you leave an execution focused meeting with. A one on one. What is the purpose of a one on one?
Yeah.
And so, a one on one is a great time to focus on things like accountability,
Mhm.
because that's a difficult thing to do in a large group setting without destroying morale or lowering trust. A one on one is a great time to build trust and rapport
Yeah.
because you can actually ask someone about their life and share about your
Yeah.
life in ways that creates what behavioral scientists would call mutuality, which is
Yeah.
because people don't follow robots into the fog of uncertainty. People follow
Yeah.
humans into the fog of uncertainty. So in a one on one is when you build capital by having selective authenticity. Um, a one-on-one is a great time to diagnose and treat. So, Sanja,
Yeah.
I've noticed that the past few times we've met, you've indicated that you feel overwhelmed. Let's go through and do a desk
Mhm.
audit. I want to hear everything you're doing so we can figure out what's keeping you busy that may be low impact and find a way to sunset it.
Yeah.
That's a good use for a one-on-one. So the decision-making framework is about helping, and I often do this. This comes up with mid-managers, getting clarity on the idea that each kind of meeting is actually a different technology that can be deployed against different use cases. And when you have
Yeah.
clarity on why you deploy technologies against different use cases, then you can go, okay, so let me take back some time by reducing the frequency of one on ones. Let me increase operational execution focused meetings with these two sub teams. Let me only have a town hall for my area once a month, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I would say is sometimes we hear about CEOs doing things, and then there's real bad signal degradation by the time it gets into the world of work. So
Mhm.
there was a buzzy story 6 or 8 months ago. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, currently the most valuable company in the world, has 65 direct reports and never meets with them one on one. He only leads in the group of 65. People hear this and they go, oh, I'll drop all my one on ones. There's a lot of context you're missing here, right? If
Yeah.
you're a senior vice president, a GM, an EVP at NVIDIA, you probably don't need one-on-ones to do your work. At that point in time, you're such a seasoned
Yeah.
operator that largely this is about company strategy and responding to the macro and things like that. That doesn't work in most cases, right? So when people see that news headline about Jensen and 65 directs and no one-on-ones, if you tried to do that in a normal business when you're a director running a mid-level team, you will lose trust, belonging, and connection so quickly on your
Yeah.
team. And the way it'll show up is through a lack of innovation, a lack of agility, and a lack of resilience. And
Yeah.
so there's real threats to not understanding that that how you meet with your people and what you solve for is actually an asset in driving team performance.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Vishay. Like as you were going through that, I was literally doing like calculations and mapping in my mind. I'm like, okay, what are my one-on-one purposes and what is the group and what isn't it? And so I love that way of thinking. And as you were saying all of that, one thing that maybe I hadn't thought about as much before, but I would add is as leaders, a lot of times we think about what do we need, right? What do we need from
Mm.
our team? What's our purpose? I think it's so important to also know our team members' purpose and how they need
Yeah.
us. Because it's not just, oh, I can work with this person in this kind of way, but it's
Mhm.
also how do you need me to show up? Because I've also realized I've always been a, pretty social person, connected. And again, love having my, one-on-ones and relationships with my teams for I think the right reasons based on what you were saying. And then sometimes I started realizing that my team members between themselves were not connecting as much. So I would try to orchestrate and encourage that. But I realized in the process of that, if a lot of times I was the holder of information that could be really valuable for them to do their
Ah,
job, that I need to also proactively give that to them. And also, I know there's people with philosophies of, hey, let's not do scheduled meetings, let's do as needed meetings, which I love, except when you have a really busy schedule and somebody
yes.
needs you and you're like, I can't fit you in. That actually happened with one of my team members today. Luckily, I could meet with him 2 hours after he had asked me, not at the
That's
moment,
not
but he
bad.
still had to
Not
do,
bad.
not bad, but I did have to do some shifting around, right? And it can't always happen. Like it couldn't happen
Yep.
right now when you and I are talking. It couldn't happen
Sure.
when I maybe have a client meeting. And so, anyways, to me, I was thinking about that for leaders to think about like, okay, why am I having this? What do I need? But then also to check in maybe with my people like, hey, when I joined Question Pro, I was learning so much. I literally had a one-on-one with one of my team members every single day. And I think it was like for a month. And it was so valuable because every day
Yes.
we went through different things we learned and we knew we had that space. And then
Yep.
after a while, now, funny enough, we're down to 2 times a week and we're like, I'm 4.5 years in, but we always have even more to talk about than that time allows. It's incredible. And so we found that dynamic that works for both of us. So, anyways, thank you for sharing that because I do think,
Yeah.
to your point, like there are a lot of buzzy stories and there are a lot of kind of like edgy things that are working for people. And before somebody like jumps on that bandwagon, is to really think about what are your individual needs and your team needs. Now,
Sanja, let me
you
riff
mentioned,
off of
yeah,
that. Can I jump in and just
yeah,
when you were saying like individual
yes,
needs, team needs, I want to notice two things. I think you
yeah,
mentioned you have to understand your team's sense of purpose, and I would just expand the aperture and say like you have to know your team, right? Like know your people because you don't coach the position, you coach the player. I'm using a sports metaphor when I don't even know anything about sports. I don't actually care
but
about
it's a
sports.
good, you did it
So
well.
I faked it. I faked it there. But the reality is, like, a good leader is a mentor, a coach, a manager, an executor. They're all of those things, and they're constantly swapping what hat they're wearing. And in order to do that well, you got to know your people. And so when you talk about this sort of trending thing around, hey, you shouldn't even have scheduled meetings, just allow your people to find you. If you have mid and upper mid level senior people reporting to you, I actually think maybe that's the right thing for certain business contexts or certain
Yeah,
org contexts. If you have professionals in the first years of their career, I think that's unfair to them because think about what you're trying to learn in the first 5 years of your career. Partly, you're trying to learn how to work, you're trying to learn how to adult. And so, part of what a manager can give is the stability of a regular one on one, a structured report that my bosses asked for a structured report. It had segments. I had to
yeah,
share certain kinds of information. That taught me so much about ways of working, jobs to be
yeah,
done, right? When you don't have that and you're in this agile, fluid, get at me, slack me, blah, 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 then you can end up moving out of the entry level ranks and you're
yeah,
missing some fundamental skill sets. So again, also there's some nuance here around age and stage. Where is
yeah,
somebody in their career and how do you need to lead them differently? The other thing I was going to say, because I think that this is really relevant to our audience here, right? And so I just want to share
yeah,
more practical tips.
yeah,
There's also a growing concern around how do I handle the scope creep? I have so much work to do. And leadership experts like Dr. Vijay Pendakur keep telling me that I should build good relationships with my people. And I don't have time. I don't have time for getting to know them and sharing of myself. And so I read The Alchemy of Talent and I just feel gaslit on some level. And so, one thing I always advise is you can actually unbundle some of the relationship building time from the get the job done time. And one way to do that is to actually just be really transparent with your team or your team of teams and say, hey, folks, I love people. I want to get to know you. We are under tremendous pressure as an organization right now. We're expected to do a lot of hard things. You may notice that in meetings, I'm going to be all business. But once a month, I'm going to be holding a virtual water cooler and I will
yeah,
advertise it weeks in advance. And if you can make it the only rule in this Zoom room or Teams room that I'm going to be hanging out in is that we can't talk about work. And so what you do is you
Mm,
shift the relationship time into a space where you can get it all done in 1 hour and have a fun time and connect and share of yourself and that theater program you went to see or whatever, right? And the team knows that you do care about people, but right now it's business, right? And we got to get business done
yeah.
in the meetings. So there's a level of dynamism that comes with thinking about time as a currency and allocating it strategically and then communicating transparently. If I had an unlimited amount of time, I'd spend the first 15 minutes of every meeting getting to know you and sharing of myself. We don't have
Yeah.
that situation right now. So I'm going to actually set that aside. I'm going to unbundle it and we can do it once a month. And the only rule at the
Yeah.
Vijay water cooler is we don't talk about work. You know what I mean? People love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a little pro tip I'll throw out for the audience to use if they feel like they cannot get to the sharing stuff in their meeting structures.
Yeah. Oh, I love that tip too, because I know for me, as somebody who loves sharing personal things and learning from people, sometimes it can get a little dicey in meetings because depending on what a person wants to share, it could end up taking a really long time. And
Yeah.
especially if you open that, you don't want to be like, well, that's parking lot that. Like, no,
Yes.
somebody's sharing really something really big. But then if you
Yes.
truly have projects and things you need to get to, it's sometimes good to have that boundary. So I think I love your example because I think it works for leaders who kind of have a hard time like asking for personal things and actually creating that space, or leaders maybe like me that like love to share and love to learn about their
Yeah.
people, but then sometimes like that starts to take away from the space and then you have to have another meeting or you have to have because like work still needs to get done, and so it's kind of figuring out your personality and how to best manage it, and I think it works really for any part of the spectrum. So I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I could not finish this conversation without getting into something that I think is so important for people right
Mm.
now, which is the sense of burnout and being overwhelmed.
Mm.
And I think as we get adjusted to all of these changing dynamics, um, I don't know about you, but I think what I find with me lately that's kind of weird is like when I was younger, I would almost experience like the sense of overwhelm or burnout like in bigger chunks. But now it just almost seems to like be like a roller coaster. Like there are just days when there's so much, so much. And then there are days that I feel like I finally catch my breath. And then the next day, like the rug is pulled from under me again. And so I think as somebody, and I know when we were preparing for today, I told you like I feel like a relatively resilient person. Like I was a child of war. I left former Yugoslavia, like I've been through a lot of
Yeah.
things in life. I've lived in different continents. And sometimes like I'm just so tired of being resilient. can I can I can I
Preach.
pause it? I know.
Yes.
Can I just be resilient no
Yes.
more? I need a break. I need a break.
Yes.
So let's take our
Yes.
last few minutes and give us all of your, and I know you even have a framework around it. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
everything that you want to share, because I want to leave people with that, because I think
Yeah.
probably
That's
no matter how strong we're feeling, it's an area where we could all use some more love and care and encouragement
yeah.
and
Yeah.
advice. So please
Yes.
share your wisdom.
Yeah, totally, totally. I got frameworks. I got frameworks on frameworks on frameworks.
Yes.
So, but I so can identify with just the moments where you feel like, can I just take a break from being resilient? I'm flat on my back here. Good Lord, life will not stop lifing, right? And so, let me say the two myths we need to bust so that the frameworks I share make sense. Quick myth busting. One, when we think about ourselves having as a battery, right? If we have a battery that is our capacity, our vibrance, our energy, there's two myths. One is that there is that we have multiple batteries, so that you can be burned out at home and somehow still successful at work, or burned out at work and successful at home. Let me establish some clarity. The neuroscience doesn't support this. There's just one battery. So all of the parts of your pie chart actually have to be sustainable, because if you burn out in any one part of your life, it will show up elsewhere. And I'm not trying to raise the bar on the audience here. I'm just stating what our sort of physiological truth is, so that you feel more compelled to then say, oh gosh, okay, so what do I got to do? Second battery myth is that our batteries can only be plugged in occasionally for recharge, because we can just overclock and run in the red. And then twice a year, we can go to Mexico and lay on a beach and be at the all-inclusive. And that's what resilience looks like. That's my plan to combat burnout is I will work myself ragged all the time. And then twice a year, go somewhere and lay on a beach. Now, that the battery actually needs to be recharged every day. So one thing I can give you here is to think about the framework of battery and recharging every day is the idea of low friction resets. I use this in my coaching and team effectiveness practice. A low friction reset is the opposite of the once a year trip to the all-inclusive resort. It's the reality that you actually have to clear the cortisol and other stress hormones out of your nervous system frequently throughout the day in order to keep you from feeling that wear and tear from the way we work nowadays, right? And so a low friction reset is the idea that there are small things you can do that take 5 to 10 minutes that actually are evidence-based science that allow you to replenish and restore the battery. So examples of a low friction reset. If you have a pet, putting your devices away and just playing with your pet or petting your pet for 5 minutes actually restores. There's oxytocin that floods the brain when you play with your pet. It's a pleasure chemical. It's a bonding chemical. If you take a 10-minute walk and you do not look at any devices, you'll hear me say no devices over and over and over again, right? Because we have a problem with these devices. 10-minute walk. Motion, right? There's sports psychology research, moving your body and just not doing anything else. 10 minutes actually clears out some of the gunk in your nervous system. If you want to listen to a piece of music, or if you're a musician like I am, playing a piece of music puts you in a flow state for 5 minutes. Staring into the middle distance. If you're like, Vijay, I don't even have the walk. I can't even walk, right? You can, if you live in a little apartment in Midtown New York City and you can't go for a walk, if you stare out of a window at something about 50 yards away, the middle distance, and let your eyes unfocus, you can balance the brain waves in your brain after 3 to 5 minutes. So these are all examples of little sports psychology behavioral resets that you can use in your day that actually buy back battery storage, battery capacity all day long, because you can squeeze in low friction resets in the morning, in the mid-morning, in the afternoon. And this is an example. It's not a silver bullet. Life is hard. There are no silver bullets, but it's one of many tools that I always talk about, right? In a toolbox with multiple tools. This is one of those tools that normalizes endless disruption, that normalizes a world that is volatile and uncertain, and asks, and then says, okay, the old way, the Gen Xer way of keep working hard and go on vacation, I need to put that aside. That doesn't actually line up with reality or science. What I need to do is change my day-to-day rituals and workflow to allow my nervous system to reboot and clear out some of the gunk so that I don't feel that kind of walls closing in feeling of crispiness, burnt crispy, right? And I know we're at time, but Sanja, let me just end by saying that resilience is an investment every one of us needs to make in order to actually allow us to accomplish what we want to accomplish in our lives. Burnout is often a litmus of organizational failure. So as somebody who truly believes in fairness, I have to name this. Burnout is not the same. When you ask burned out people in an organization to get resilient, you're basically saying survive an organizational failure. And that's not fair, because burnout means that there are problems with the roles and responsibilities, or the way people are working, or the lack of clarity around what success looks like, or the reality of timelines and deadlines, right? So that when people say, oh, our organization has a burnout problem, Vijay, can you come work with people on resilience? I will literally say no. But I will work with your people team on organizational development and design to take back your failure to design an organization in which people can thrive. Resilience, though, is the skills of managing yourself, your nervous system, and the clarity and agency in your personal life so that you can live the life you want, right? And I think the conflation of resilience and burnout lets organizations off the hook and gaslights people. And it makes them feel like, oh my gosh, I have to get grittier in the face of organizational failure.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that that my voice is clear on this.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think that makes a huge difference because what I'm hearing you say loud and clear is resilience is not a cure for organizations that have people feeling burnt out. And what I love in your example too is these very actionable, real, daily things people can do because I could not agree with you more. And I feel like there are more people who understand the philosophy of needing to rest every day, needing to like recharge. It's not everybody because I even catch myself. You and I are about the same age. And I remember like when I was, first entering the workforce, like burning the midnight oil was a badge of honor for everybody. Like that was like, oh, I slept only 2 hours last night. Like, oh my God, that's
That's
amazing.
how
Like,
we
and
learn
now
to
I know.
communicate. Yeah, totally. Right.
Right? Like, and it was this incredible thing. And now I know when somebody tells me that, I'm like, oh, good. Like, no, please, like, go rest because I know it's not healthy for you. And I know you're not going to be as productive going on so little sleep. And so, I think as you were saying that too, one thing that popped into my mind is that it's not, I think more of us are realizing that, more of us are practicing that. I think it's so important, especially for leaders to be vocal about that
Mm,
and continued
yeah.
education like what you're doing, because we might have peers that are still burning the midnight oil, and we might have peers who still have that perception of, oh, I barely have time to eat and sleep because I'm
Yeah.
so busy. And then
Yeah.
that goes down and trickles down to their teams, and they feel like, okay, so that's what's expected out of me, and that's what success looks like. So even if it's just modeling to the rest of the organization, like, hey, I'm successful and like I'm really taking care of myself, and that's what that looks like, I think is still really important because I think
Mm,
these things that you're saying now are like very well documented in how neuroscience works. To me, it's still not quite the norm. Like we're still not there.
no.
So the
No.
more we talk
Yeah.
about it and the more we model it, I think the better chance we have that people are actually going to start living these healthier lives and not feel like, oh my God, I just have to like hold on and let me keep pushing and pushing because eventually I'll have that vacation where my battery will
Yes.
recharge. Like,
Yes.
no,
Yes.
or it will
Yes.
recharge and then it'll burn out like the day you're back. And what's the
That's
point
right.
of that?
That's right.
Oh, well,
That's a hopeful place to end.
yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for today. It's just been
Yeah.
such a pleasure spending this time with you. Thank you for this conversation. Well, I know we'll send up follow-up notes to
Perfect.
all of our friends and everyone to join us today. Where's the best place for somebody to learn more about you and your work and contact you?
Thank you. Well, my home base, my digital home base is www.vijaypendakur.com. I have a unique name, and nobody else has my website or my name, and so you just put me in Google, and that's my home base. It's very easy to contact me. So I'd love to continue the conversation. If anybody on the
Yeah.
call wants to reach out and share something that you find to be relevant, or what you're doing, or ask a question, I'm here, and I would love to be a colleague to you.
Oh, and thank you, Vijay. I think that that's so kind of you, and I hope many of you take Vijay up on his offer because, as you can tell, he's just such a wealth of passion and information. And because of that, too, we're so lucky to have Vijay at our annual X Day conference. It's going to be in Austin, Texas, on October 9th. We'll send you
Yeah.
all a website and where you can sign up for it. But I really hope you can join us. We have really incredible speakers, incredible sessions, and we're learning more and more that there is this incredible sense of community. But one thing
Mm,
that it's really like resonated with me this year, I think maybe even before, that a lot of us are lucky enough to have that inside of our workplaces. However, there are these really incredible communities of like-minded individuals, and maybe it's not even like-minded, it's like passionate individuals that are starting to get together in these groups outside of work to learn from each other and really re-energize in a very different way. And that is one of our big goals and one of our big visions for X Days. So if you're somebody who is so passionate about the world of work, about employee experience, about how we can really collectively shape the future for the better together, it's going to be a great place for you. So again, we'll follow up with a link and more details, but I just wanted to mention because I'm sure all of you that are here and have listened to this conversation would love to hear more from Vishay, and he is going to be one of our panelists. So, Vishay, thank you again so much for joining us today. You are an incredible human being, and I'm so glad to be able to call you a colleague and a friend. And thank you all of you who joined us for this webinar today. It's wonderful to spend time with you. I know time is the biggest asset we all have today, so it's true privilege and honor that you spent your time with us. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all soon. Hopefully, many of you in Austin, Texas. Take care,
Bye.
everyone.